Hi, my name is Dawn Rowe, and today we're going to talk about assessing and interpreting your post-school outcomes data for students with disabilities, and really provide some recommendation for stakeholders groups as they begin to analyze and interpret post-school outcomes data. State and local educators and administrators have lots and lots and lots of data at their fingertips. And if you think about it, every day you cross paths with attendance data, you have behavior data, you have assessment data, dropout data, graduation data, all kinds of other information. There's a key term that a lot of folks in the field are talking about, being data rich but information poor. We have lots and lots of data, but we're kind of challenged with this effort of what do we do with it. So having access to the data can be really challenging. Having the time to review can be really challenging. And then just having the right data to drive the interventions that you're wanting and the students that you want to target at the right time, at the right dosage. So all of these things are kind of things to consider as you begin to embark on this journey for analyzing your post-school outcomes data. So really important is getting relevant and meaningful information. Knowing how Indicator 14 data are collected for youth with disabilities in your state and local district helps with understanding if the data is meaningful information. Knowing the procedures for assessing the data for use at the local level. And then the big question is what do you do once you have the data? So how are Indicator 14 data collected for youth with disabilities in your state or local district? You know, beyond school completers, which are graduates, is there a process to capture those students who've aged out, early leavers, dropouts, or those who were expected to return but did not? Is there a process in your state or district to capture students from the disability categories, including students who are deaf and hard of hearing? And this is really important questions to ask, and you would ask, a lot of this information will be included in your state's SPP-APR, or the State Performance Plan Annual Performance Report, but you may also have to find someone in order to access the data, a data manager or a state level transition representative. So Indicator 14 data are collected. So these are some of the things that you'll be looking for as you're talking with your state transition person or reading through the SPP-APR. If survey data are used in your state, look for questions that says, how has your state defined the respondents? Again, this information is critical in making sure that you have valid and reliable data. Has the state defined strategies to ensure high response rates, specifically for those youth who are hard to find? Again, developing a system or procedure to disseminate the data for local use. Is that system in place so that you can have access to the data? For those states using administrative data sources, you're wanting to make sure the state has access to those relevant databases containing the information on post-school outcomes. You want to make sure that they have sufficient data elements within these databases to define or to allow them to accurately report post-school outcomes data. And again, have that system in place for disseminating data back down for the local use. Knowing the who, what, when, and where, and how of data collection is really going to help you in determining if the data presented to you is valid and reliable, which is really key. An important part to consider is asking for information on response rate and representativeness. These are key pieces in data collection. You know, response rate is just one measure of the quality of the survey data, and it's defined as the number of completed interviews divided by the number of youth eligible to take the survey or to do the interview. Representativeness measures how similar those who responded to the survey are to the target population. So, you know, the National Post-School Outcomes sets a parameter of plus or minus 3%, which was approved by the Office of Special Education Programs. So you're looking to make sure that all the underrepresented groups are represented in your sample. So the minority youth, those served for severe emotional behavior disorders, dropouts, and other disability categories, and gender. So the other question that you have to consider are what are the procedures for accessing data for use at the local level. So you have to be able to access the data. You'll have to find out who the state contact is for accessing post-school outcome data or other secondary transition data like indicators 1, 2, or 13. It may be a state or local transition contact. It may be a state or local data manager. It could be someone else, but you need to seek out that person. And then the key question is, what data do I need to ask for? So once you find the person that has access to the data, ask them about data by disability categories, disaggregated by, say, learning disabilities, deaf of hard of hearing, autism, intellectual disabilities. You also want data by race, ethnicity, data by gender, and data by exit status. And then there may be certain data governance procedures within your state or your districts for you to make the request for your district data. So you need to kind of learn what those might be. They're going to be different in each state and sometimes even different in each district. So once you have the data, what do you do with it? It's simple logic. You really want to kind of do some backwards planning. Think about the outcomes, what students are currently achieving, and kind of work backwards to determine some improvement activities and the resources needed to improve those outcomes. And the outcomes could be anything. It could be, ultimately you want it to be improved outcomes for youth with disabilities, but you also may need to have improved teacher knowledge of interventions in order to make that happen. So you're just going to do some backwards planning. Basic database decision making. Really, database decision making is a process in which you make meaning of the data within your context, whether that be the state context, the district context, or the school context. Again, you have lots and lots of types of data that you have access to. This data really turns into information for you all. And then the information, what's important is turning that information into action. So making actions and beginning to make some decisions regarding what to do next based on the data that you've seen. So some questions to consider as you're analyzing the data. What patterns are you seeing? Really, you're not looking at specific numbers when you're analyzing data. You're looking for patterns. You're looking at different categories: gender, method of exit, race, ethnicities. Is one group doing better than others? Looking at trends over years is really important to see if the same populations are achieving the same types of outcomes over time. There might be, in your state, if you're looking at state data, you might have some differences in regions, and then you can start to examine what's happening at those different regions and what are we doing differently. And then last but not least is really what are those actions that a state or a school or district can take to improve and maintain those current outcomes for graduation and engagement rates and really decrease the dropout rates for youth with disabilities. So some recommendations that we have as you move forward in your conquest to analyze post-school outcome data is to really convene a stakeholder group together. Stakeholder groups are really key in making meaning of data because we all have different perspectives and we all have different access to different data. So we bring lots of good stories to the table. Include in your stakeholder group youth with disabilities, parents, teachers, administrators, community members. As you're acquiring your secondary transition data from your school or district, begin to look and identify those different patterns in the data and identify a certain area of focus, whether it be specific population of youth, a specific school, or a specific program, but you really need to narrow the focus and not try to solve the whole world's problem in one day. Once you've got that identified focus area, then you just take action to improve in-school and post-school outcomes for youth who are deaf or hard of hearing. Really exciting. Thank you, and that's all we have for today.